Out here where the desert wind could strip a man's soul bare, a cruel joke was played. One that would haunt an entire town. They gave an Apache woman to a lonely rancher as a jest. But what came next was something no one dared laugh at again. Before we ride into this tale of pain, honor, and redemption, hit that like button, subscribe, and saddle up. You won't want to miss how it ends. The noon sun burned over Dry Creek as laughter echoed through the dusty saloon. A group of drunken co-hands hooted and clapped as the sheriff's men shoved a thin, proud Apache woman through the swinging doors. Her wrists were bound, her clothes torn from travel, and her dark eyes burned like smoldering coals. "Ain't she a fine prize?" one of them jeered. "A gift for the rancher with the loneliest heart." The crowd erupted, and in the corner, a man named Elias Boone looked up from his whiskey glass. He was a broad-shouldered rancher with a face carved from hard years and loss. His wife gone, his land dying under drought, his spirit half buried. When the sheriff joked that Elias might finally find company with the savage woman, something in his chest twisted. He didn't laugh. He didn't speak. He just stood, set down his glass, and walked forward. The woman stood tall despite the taunts. Dust covered her face, but her eyes, fierce and unbroken, met his. "What's your name?" Elias asked quietly. She didn't answer. "They call her Ho." "Key," someone shouted. "Means when that doesn't bow." More laughter followed, but Elias's face stayed still as stone. He tossed a silver coin on the counter. A payment, a protest, no one could tell. Then he cut the rope from her wrists and said simply, "Come with me." They left to silence. Out in the fading light, the town shrank behind them as the sound of boots on dirt faded into the wind. For miles they rode without speaking. The only sound was the creak of leather and the sighing wind through the canyon. When they reached the ranch, Elias handed her water, a blanket, and pointed to the old guest cabin by the stable. "You'll stay there?" he said, his voice rough. "You're free now." But freedom, Ho Key knew, was a fragile thing in a white man's world. That night, as coyotes cried and cold crept across the land, she sat by the fire watching him repair a broken fence under the moon. He was alone, not cruel, not loud, just hollow, and she wondered why he didn't ask where she'd come from, or who'd done this to her. The next morning, she rose early and began to work. She fetched water, mended torn saddles, cleaned tools not out of fear, but pride. Elias tried to stop her, but she said, "You gave me shelter." "I will give back." He said nothing, only nodded. Over days, the silence between them softened. He began to speak of his lost wife, how she died birthing a child that never took a first breath. Ho Key listened, saying little, but her eyes told stories older than his grief. By the week's end, the town started whispering. "Boone's gone soft," they said, "keeping that savage woman like she's kin." Some rode out to mock him again, but Elias met them at the gate, hand on his revolver. "You step 1 foot further," he said, voice low, "and you'll answer for it." The men laughed, until they saw the look in his eyes. They turned back without another word. When the sun set that night, Ho Key came to him quietly by the fence. The wind tugged her hair loose, the stars bright above. "They hate what they don't understand," she said. "But we're alone now. It's time to do what must be done." Her voice trembled not with fear, but with truth. Something between them had shifted. Elias looked at her, not as property, not as a stranger, but as the first sign of life his heart had felt in years. Morning came with blood-red light over the hills. The storm that had brewed between worlds, white and Apache, past and pain, was about to break. Elias awoke to the sound of hooves, riders from town. Men with guns, liquor, and hate. They wanted the woman back to finish their cruel joke. He stepped outside with his rifle in hand as Ho Key stood behind him, unflinching. "You don't need to do this," she said softly. "They'll kill you." "I've already been dead," he replied. The riders stopped a few yards away. "We'll take the girl," the sheriff sneered. "Town says she ain't fit to live on white land." Elias leveled his rifle. "This land's mine," he said, "and on my land, she stays." The silence that followed was cut by thunder, gunfire ripping the cold morning air. When the dust settled, Elias stood wounded, clutching his side, but the riders were gone. Ho ran to him, pressing her hands to his wound, whispering in her native tongue words meant to keep spirits bound to flesh. He smiled faintly. "You're free now," he said again, voice fading, but she shook her head. "Not without you." Weeks later, when spring broke across the valley, the ranch came alive again. Wildflowers pushed through the dirt. Ho tended the land, her hands steady, her eyes always drifting toward the horizon where Elias had fallen. She had buried him there under the old oak where his wife once dreamed of a home filled with laughter. Now, it was a home built by her hands, shaped by his sacrifice. And when travelers came through the valley, they spoke of a woman who lived alone on Boone Ranch. Strong, proud, unbroken, who carried the ghost of a man in her heart and the will of the wind in her soul. So if you believe love can grow even in the ashes of cruelty, hit that like button, subscribe, and remember sometimes what's done in silence echoes forever across the Wild West.